The young and the restless spoilers under a suffocating cloak of uncertainty and despair, the night seemed to stretch on interminably. In one secluded room where chaos reigned, Phyllis could no longer bear the excruciating torment that had gnawed at her for what felt like an eternity. Overwhelmed by pain and desolation, her body finally gave way. She collapsed into a deep, unconscious faint. In the midst of this disarray, Sharon's anguished cries echoed through the empty corridors. Her voice, raw and desperate, pleaded for help as she screamed repeatedly into the void. Yet, amid the terror and confusion, one unnerving detail became abundantly clear: the kidnapper, who had orchestrated this abominable ordeal, was nowhere to be found. His silence was as chilling as his absence, leaving Sharon's desperate pleas unanswered. But fate had one more twist in store, a beacon of hope that emerged in the form of Nick. Ever vigilant and haunted by the thought of Sharon disappearing into the unknown, Nick had taken precautions that, at that very moment, proved to be invaluable. Driven by an unyielding sense of protectiveness, he had secretly installed a tracking application on Sharon's phone, convinced that she might be lured away or placed in imminent danger without his knowledge. His intuition had been proven right, as the tracking signal led him directly to this grim tableau. With urgency pulsing through his veins, Nick stormed through the door, his heart pounding as fast as the rapid beat of his anxious thoughts. The scene that unfolded before him was a nightmare incarnate. Phyllis lay in a critical state on the cold floor, her fragile form a testament to the cruelty of the night's events. In that harrowing moment, every second stretched into an eternity as Nick's protective instincts surged forth. He could no longer stand idly by. Without a moment's hesitation, he gathered Phyllis in his arms and rushed her to the hospital, his every step fueled by a blend of fear and fierce determination. Meanwhile, as the emergency lights danced erratically on the walls of the derelict building, Sharon, overcome with relief and a turbulent flood of emotions, collapsed into Nick's embrace. Tears mingled with whispered reassurances as the two clung to each other, their reunion a bittersweet moment amidst the chaos. Nick's soothing voice cut through the pandemonium. "We're safe now, Sharon. Don't be afraid. Everything will be all right." His words, though simple, carried the weight of his unwavering commitment to protect them both. At the hospital, the urgency of the situation was palpable. Phyllis was rushed into emergency care, and as skilled hands worked to stabilize her, the quiet murmur of doctors and nurses set a backdrop of determined hope against the relentless uncertainty. Summer and Daniel, having arrived at the scene, gathered around Phyllis with anxious eyes and heavy hearts, their presence a silent prayer for her recovery. They knew all too well the toll that these tragedies took, not just on the body, but on the spirit. Yet even in the midst of these fleeting moments of respite, Nick's mind refused to settle. He lingered in the sterile corridors of the hospital, his eyes fixed on the monitors that measured Phyllis's fragile heartbeat. There was an intensity in his gaze, a resolve that spoke of his readiness to take decisive action should any further threat arise. He was determined that no one would be allowed to harm her again, and if trouble reared its ugly head, Nick vowed he would be the one to confront it head-on. The emotional landscape of that night was as tumultuous as the storm raging outside, where every drop of rain seemed to mirror the cascading tears of those who had suffered so deeply. In that crucible of despair and hope, Nick's love for Phyllis shone through as a beacon of unwavering loyalty. His heart ached not only for the pain she had endured but also for the loss of the life they once dreamed of sharing. In quiet moments, away from the clamorous urgency of the emergency room, he closed his eyes and whispered fervent prayers for her recovery. "Please, let her be strong," he murmured, his voice a fragile blend of hope and desperation. "May she find the strength to overcome this, and may our future be one where pain is replaced with healing and light." Outside, the night continued its relentless march, indifferent to the dramas unfolding within the hospital walls. But within those walls, amid the sterile hum of medical machinery and the soft footsteps of nurses attending to their duties, a collective hope began to take root. The staff, seasoned by their own encounters with the fragility of life, worked tirelessly, their actions a silent testament to the human spirit's capacity for resilience. As hours bled into the early light of dawn, the first gentle rays of the sun filtered through the hospital windows, casting a tender glow over the room where Phyllis lay. The storm outside had subsided into a melancholic drizzle, mirroring the tentative sense of calm that was beginning to settle over those who had been touched by the night's tragedies. In that soft, diffused light, the faces of those who loved Phyllis were etched with both exhaustion and hope. Summer and Daniel, though burdened by the pain of their past losses, shared quiet moments of solace, their presence a reminder that even in the darkest of nights, the bonds of family and love could offer a path to recovery. Nick, still vigilant and unyielding in his duty, continued to stand by Phyllis's side. His resolve had hardened into an unspoken promise, a promise that he would remain ever watchful, ever ready to act in the face of any challenge. His heart, now a reservoir of fierce determination, held on to the belief that love could conquer even the most harrowing of circumstances. The memories of past betrayals and the scars of previous battles were etched into his soul, but they also served as a driving force that compelled him to safeguard those he held dear. In the quiet interludes between the beeping monitors and the hushed conversations of the night shift, Nick allowed himself a fleeting moment of reflection. He recalled the countless nights when fear had gripped him, the countless times he had wished for a sign that everything would be all right. And now, as he watched over Phyllis with a heart full of love and a mind sharpened by resolve, he vowed that he would not rest until the specters of their shared past were exorcised and replaced by a future filled with promise. For Nick, the journey ahead was as daunting as it was uncertain, but the unwavering conviction in his heart provided a beacon of light. The echoes of Sharon's relieved sobs and the gentle murmur of hope from Summer and Daniel blended into a symphony of resilience, a symphony that declared, without reservation, that in the face of unspeakable darkness, the human spirit could rise, unbroken, to embrace the dawn of a new day. And so, in that tender space between despair and hope, where every heartbeat was a testament to survival and every whispered prayer a plea for redemption, Nick's silent promise resonated, a promise that he would stand guard over Phyllis, that he would ensure her safety at all costs, and that one day, through the long, arduous path of recovery, they would all find solace in a future defined not by the scars of the past but by the healing light of a new beginning. Nick had poured every ounce of his strength into protecting those he held dear. He couldn't bear the thought of losing anyone, least of all Phyllis, whose life now hung in a precarious balance. Every moment at the hospital was a battle against time, as he monitored her condition with a fierce, unwavering determination. While Nick's dedication was born out of pure love and responsibility, it stirred something unexpected in Sharon. As she watched him anxiously hovering over Phyllis, a familiar pang of jealousy gnawed at her, an emotion she had long tried to suppress. Yet, even as these turbulent feelings surfaced, she knew deep down that Nick's actions were exactly what a devoted man should do, protect his loved ones without hesitation. In a quiet hospital room, Elena, a skilled and enigmatic medical specialist, was tending to Phyllis. The poison that had nearly claimed her life was no ordinary toxin, it was an unusual compound, one that demanded not only immediate treatment but also a painstaking analysis to identify its precise nature. Elena's expert hands administered a series of specialized antidotes, each chosen with care to counteract the effects of the venom coursing through Phyllis's veins. Even as Phyllis lay motionless on the bed, her fragile body suspended between life and death, Elena's focus was absolute. She was determined to decode the mystery of this rare poison and secure the only chance for Phyllis's recovery, finding the exact antidote that could neutralize it completely. Meanwhile, the scene outside the hospital was fraught with tension and urgency. The police had cordoned off the area where Phyllis and Sharon had been held captive, their presence a stark reminder that this incident was not merely a random act of violence, it was a meticulously orchestrated crime. Officers scoured the premises for clues, carefully documenting every piece of evidence in the hope of unraveling the identity of the mastermind behind the kidnapping. Their silent command echoed through the quiet corridors, "Whoever is responsible for this atrocity, step forward and confess your crimes." The call for accountability hung heavy in the air, a challenge directed at an unseen enemy whose shadow had darkened their lives. Inside the secure perimeter, Nick's resolve only hardened. His eyes, still brimming with unshed tears from witnessing Phyllis's suffering, met Sharon's with a mixture of determination and silent reproach. "We have to stay strong," he murmured, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging within him. "I promise you, we will get through this. I won't let anything happen to any of you." Sharon, though her heart twisted with conflicting feelings, nodded in agreement. Deep down, she recognized that Nick's relentless vigilance was not just a matter of duty, it was the embodiment of the kind of love that could protect even in the darkest of times. As the investigation gathered momentum, whispers of suspicion began to circulate among the police and within the tightly knit community of those affected by the ordeal. Was this an isolated act of desperation, or was there a far more sinister plan unfolding behind the scenes? The evidence, painstakingly collected by the officers, hinted at a deeper conspiracy, a well-planned abduction that had exploited vulnerabilities and left a trail of shattered lives in its wake. Every piece of forensic data, every hidden clue, and every circumstantial detail was being scrutinized, as the search intensified for the elusive puppeteer orchestrating this twisted drama. In the hospital, Elena's steady hands continued their work on Phyllis, her mind racing with questions about the poison's origin. The antidote she had administered was based on a delicate balance of chemistry and hope, a temporary solution until a more permanent cure could be found. With every test and analysis, she was edging closer to understanding the substance that had nearly stolen Phyllis's life. Yet the complexity of the toxin only deepened the mystery, adding another layer of urgency to the already dire situation. Amidst this chaos, Nick's determination never waned. He stood vigil at the hospital, his presence a constant reassurance to everyone who needed it. Every whispered conversation in the sterile hallways, every anxious glance at the monitors, reinforced his belief that they were all locked in a struggle against time, a race to expose the truth behind the abduction before more lives were irreparably harmed. His protective nature was as much about fighting for justice as it was about mending the fractured hearts left in the wake of the attack. In one particularly charged moment, as dusk began to give way to the inky black of night, a police sergeant approached Nick with tentative steps. "We're making progress," the officer said, his voice low and steady. "The evidence is pointing toward a well-organized network. Whoever planned this wanted to send a message that demands answers. We're urging anyone with information to come forward. We need to know who did this." The sergeant's words resonated with Nick, who silently vowed that he would not rest until the mastermind was brought to justice. The unknown figure behind the kidnapping had manipulated lives and emotions, using fear as a weapon. Now was the time for that figure to face the consequences of their actions. As the night wore on, the hospital's sterile corridors became a crossroads of hope and desperation. Elena continued her vigilant work in the lab, piecing together the chemical puzzle of the poison. Nick's eyes never strayed from the monitors displaying Phyllis's vital signs, each beep a reminder of the fragile line between hope and despair. Meanwhile, Sharon, caught in the tumult of her conflicting emotions, found herself silently questioning everything she had ever believed about loyalty and love. In this harrowing chapter of their intertwined lives, the call for accountability was clear and unequivocal. Whoever was behind the abduction was compelled to step forward and confess. It was not just a demand from law enforcement, but a plea from every wounded heart and every scarred soul who had been caught in the crossfire of betrayal and cruelty. Nick's steadfast promise echoed in every corner of that night: he would protect, he would seek the truth, and he would fight with every fiber of his being until the dark truth was laid bare for all to see. And so, as the investigation pressed on and the search for a cure continued in the hospital, a silent challenge was sent out into the world: show yourself, confess your guilt, and face the consequences of your actions. In that call lay the hope that justice, no matter how delayed, would eventually prevail, that Phyllis might recover under Elena's careful care, and that, one day, the wounds inflicted by this orchestrated crime would begin to heal. For now, every heartbeat, every whispered prayer, and every determined glance spoke of a future where the shadows of fear and betrayal would finally be replaced by the light of truth and redemption.